You are listening to Mind Over Me, the mental wellness podcast with me, Scott Carter. I am a licensed therapist and someone who is very mindful and aware of the decline in our collective mental health. I created this podcast so that we could have more direct and honest conversations about difficult topics and difficult issues. It's my goal to have honest but direct conversations that we need to have that are necessary. It's also my goal to give my listeners the information that they need in order to find their own mental health and mental wellness. This is where you will find the information that you need to be your own healer. And of course, all of this is based on years of clinical experience and expertise. Thank you for being here. Let's dive right in. And welcome back, my friends. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. This is the latest episode of Mind Over Me. A very important and yet kind of a tricky topic tonight. Tonight for me, I don't know when you're listening to this, but for me, it is well into the evening. A lot of my topics just sort of come from whatever has been on my mind lately. I'm always thinking through quite literally everything when it comes to life and being human. It's just been my goal for some time to unravel this mystery, to understand the human condition, the trickiness and the strangeness of the human condition. And this topic to me is definitely a tricky one. And I'm really going to try and tackle it here. I hope I kind of do this topic justice in terms of how it's constructed in my mind and perceived in my mind. Because as a mental health professional, there is this factor that I'm going to talk about in this episode has a massive impact on people's well-being. Huge impact on people's well-being. So this episode is going to be talking quite a bit about the harshness of accepting reality, which I think is very difficult, hard thing for a lot of people to do these days. And I decided to do this topic earlier today when I was doing some writing. I'm going to share a little bit about what's going on with me. I have some very, very big and lofty goals this year. My year last year was not great. I've probably talked about this before. My 2025 was not stellar. And so I set some big goals for myself this year. I've gotten a lot healthier so far this year. My health has improved drastically in the last couple of months. And because of health issues, I sort of missed out on a lot of years just trying to take care of my health, just trying to feel better. It took a lot longer than it rightly should have. And now I just kind of feel like I'm back in the game. So I might be spreading myself a little bit thin these days. Frankly, doing a podcast, trying to write a book. And also I have a couple of professional goals. I'm trying to make a major career pivot this year. And while I like being a therapist for people, while I like being a part of people's journeys, there are many, many things going on with me that are just unfulfilled. And in some regards, I just sort of need to do something different. But one of my goals this year is to publish a book, and I have been writing. Well, publishing this year might be a little bit lofty, but finishing a book this year and seeking a publisher this year is more so my goal. And as it were, 1 week ago, I finished the first draft on a book that I have been writing, which is a huge milestone for me, huge accomplishment, feeling happy and proud, but also knowing that the book still needs a lot of work. Initially, I had about, 15 chapters, and then I whittled it down to eight chapters. So I refined it down to the 8 chapters that I want to include. And now I'm going through it one by one. I'm going through each chapter one by one, trying to make it more personal, more relatable, share a little bit of my own story. And I just want my readers to connect to the story that I'm writing. I'm not going to talk about what the book is about, at least not for now. Hopefully down the road, right, when I get it done. But as it were, I was doing some writing about this topic and how it relates to like our romantic relationships. And that is how people have become kind of disconnected from reality, frankly. And that is essentially kind of the topic for tonight. I'm still trying to think of a good title for this. We'll figure it out. Maybe I'll plug it into the AI, get some ideas on what to call this particular topic. And so maybe a good place to start with this, because it's a complicated topic. And but today what I was writing about is how the world has just drastically changed since. I was specifically talking about romantic relationships, frankly, in this chapter, and how love is dead. And I did a previous podcast podcast episode about this exact topic, about how love is dead, how romantic love these days is like dead. It's like dead. People aren't in love anymore. People think they know what love is. They don't. They just don't. I did a whole episode about this, but romantic love is it's dead as a motherfucker. I mean, it is like, I have a can of I'm trying to talk myself into trying sardines, because the diet that I'm on is like, sardines are like the perfect food, and I'm scared of them. Honestly, they've been sitting on my counter for a couple of weeks, and I haven't opened it yet. But anyways, love these days, romantic love, people being in love, dead as a can of fucking sardines, y'all. But I was writing in my book today about what happened. I'm older than the internet. I remember days when there were so many depictions of love and romance in media. I mean, TV shows, movies, books, music, all the above. And it was just part of our culture. And it's not anymore. Like, where are the love songs? Where's the real romance in movies? Where are the books? Where's the real romance in books? Fucking dead is what it is. Just like a can of sardines. It is just dead as a motherfucker. What happened? What happened to love? Where'd it go? Well, the world just drastically changed with the internet, social media. Social media, I think, just has completely fucked us over. I mean, that is a Pandora's box I wish we had never opened. I think young people, not just young people, but I think it's just become so normal that we don't even question it anymore. We don't look at it as the poison that it is for our minds, because it is. Social media is poison for our minds. Don't take my word for it. There's more than enough research out there. Go do a deep dive. There's one author too that has written books on this, Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. I'm not sure. Haidt. Feel free to correct me. I could be mispronouncing it. Anyways, he's written entire books about this and done the research. And folks, the impacts of social media on our minds, on our brains, and our psychology is in fact fucking terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Most people are just regarding it as though it's just normal now, and that's just how it is now. And I'm like, no, I'm not accepting this reality. Do I use social media? Yeah, a little bit. But I'm always trying to remain cognizant and aware of how it might be influencing my mind or shaping my mind, because it does. It shapes and influences. I mean, there's influencers, right? But social media changes your mind, folks. It's just influencing how you think, how you perceive, the stories that you have in your head, blah, blah, blah. And I personally think that it has completely devastated our ability to have human connections. Just devastated it. Which, of course, includes like our romantic, loving relationships. Honestly, I can't think of much that's more tragic and sad or dystopian, or just frankly just totally fucking dystopian, than to have to open this Pandora's box of social media and have just completely drop a nuclear bomb in our ability to form loving, romantic relationships. And you might even be wondering, like, how does that make sense? How did you get there? Well, here's the progress of my thinking, okay? Which is really kind of the meat and potatoes of this episode. I even printed out this diagram. I had the AI like do these black and white basic sketches of 3 different versions of Earth, and side by side, like on a landscape, like Longwise document, like picture, so I could put it on a document. I printed it. Yes, I have a printer that actually works. This is a laser printer. Doesn't give me any trouble, thank God. And I laminated it. Yes, I own a laminator. Yes, I make a lot of diagrams. I use them in therapy. I'm a visual teacher. I'm a visual learner. Seems to help a lot of people. And I'll put the three. I'll put the three. The picture of the three Earths, like as the podcast picture, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Yeah, that picture will represent this episode. In other words, so here's where I'm coming from. Up until, I don't know, 25-ish years ago, people basically lived in two different versions of reality. The first is the material reality, or the reality that we observe. You use it, you can touch it, you can smell it, you can taste it, you can hear it, right? It's the observable reality. The next one would be a spiritual, right? Your intuition, or maybe even your psychology, your emotions, your inner world, right? That would be a different version of reality. I did a whole other episode as well on spirituality and therapy, so you can go listen to that if you want. And since the rise of technology, a third reality has showed up, and it's essentially the Matrix, or it's a virtual reality. Now, here's the trouble that I've noticed, especially with young people. I do a lot of work with teenagers, young adults. I work with heavily with these populations. And a lot of them, they don't connect with reality, the real world. It's foreign to them. The main world that they know is a virtual reality, or the Matrix. If you haven't watched The Matrix, 1999 original movie, go watch it. And then when it's over and you find yourself going, go watch it again. Maybe one more time for good measure. I mean, at the time, honestly, the movie was like kind of an action-packed sort of psychological thriller, sort of, and kind of a metaphor on what's real and what's not. Turned out to be a very prophetic movie. Like, I have one of the clips on my phone. I might play it, actually. Let me play one of these clips. The audio is gonna suck. I don't care. I'm a therapist, not an audio technician. Hang on. I keep this clip on my phone because to me it is a very, very important clip.
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters. The very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it.
So to me, that clip is significant. What we have is the character Morpheus. If you haven't seen the movie, the character Morpheus is explaining to Keanu Reeves, or the character Neo, what the Matrix is. It's a virtual reality that isn't real, and it does not actually exist. But everyday people are so bought into it that they cannot see the difference. They can't see through it. And in fact, they are hopelessly dependent on it. That's kind of the phrase that always stuck out to me, that they are so hopelessly dependent on it. That they would fight to protect it. So here's my point. Because you might be like, okay, what's the point? This is all very philosophical, but here's my freaking point. Because people are so plugged in, so to speak, to technology and social media, that social media has painted a narrative, a story about reality that is inaccurate. In fact, it's very, very inaccurate. And if you've only existed in this virtual world staring at your screen, you may not be very well connected to reality of what is actually real, what's actually happening. And honestly, we can tell which people this is true for because of how distressing life and reality is for them. The life in the world that they experience is like vastly different from what they believe is true in their heads. So here's my point. The more removed you are from reality, the more mentally unwell you're likely going to find yourself. See, here's the trouble. Here's the trouble when it comes to mental health, is that people live according to a story of what they think the world is actually like, or maybe there's a paradigm structure or a belief structure, right, where they believe that reality is supposed to be a certain way. Instead of accepting reality as it is, they live according to a whole giant list of shoulds and supposed to be's. People should this, people should that, people are supposed to this, people are supposed to that. And what it actually does is it disconnects them from themselves. If you're new to my podcast, I talk a lot about having a good relationship with yourself. I talk a lot about how you need to be connected, deeply connected to yourself if you want to have good mental health. Because when you're plugged into the proverbial matrix or this virtual world, you're terribly, terribly concerned about what's happening with other people. You're terribly concerned about their behavior, terribly concerned about monitoring them, censoring them, controlling them, telling them what to do, telling them how they're supposed to think, act, etc., etc. And when the person that you ought to be terribly concerned about is yourself. So when I've worked with young people who, like, they're really, really, really plugged into technology, they're really, really plugged into social media, they're very, very, very not well in a number of ways. Like I said, they're not connected to reality. Now, actually, that is the definition of the word psychosis. Okay, psychosis means you are disconnected from reality. And psychosis comes in many, many forms. It's a mile wide and it's a mile deep, the world of psychosis. I mean, it can come in some very, very extreme forms where you're just not connected to reality. Another thing that I've noticed about the ones who are really, 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 how are we going to say this? Like, I don't know, connected to who live in a virtual world instead of the real one. Those who live in the virtual world, they're very, very, very unhappy people. Every single perspective they have is a negative one. It's filled with hopelessness. It's filled with hatred. It's filled with a lot of nihilism. They're incredibly anxious for the most part. They're extremely anxious. They're anxious about everything under the sun. They just see doom and gloom around every single corner. And one teenager, just as an example, he's opening up about how he feels about the future, and he says, I think World War III is about to happen. And I said, okay, why? And he says, well, China could invade Taiwan at any time, and that would kick off World War III. And I said, dude, I've been hearing about that since 1995. My old man was a doomsday prepper and a conspiracy theorist before it was cool. It hasn't happened in the last 30 years, so why would it happen now, right? It's the lack of perspective. It's not, right? It's just those who live in the virtual world, everything is dark. Everything is dire. Friendship is bad. Human relationships is bad. Human connection is bad. Vulnerability is horrible. Being visible, even just for some of them, like even just being physically visible to other people is horrible. It's excruciating. It's horrible. They often have a negative perspective on relationships, how relationships are supposed to be, blah, blah, blah. And also people who are really plugged into the matrix, people who primarily live in the virtual world, they tend to develop a severe advanced case of the me disease. It's like because most of their interactions are just online, or if anything, they're lacking a sense of context of themselves compared to other people. It's like because the socialization never really authentically happened the way that it's supposed to be, they have a hard time viewing themselves in the context of other people. There's a lot of main character syndrome. There's a lot of the me disease. There's a lot of just seeing oneself as a central figure in everybody else's life. But what's also equally troubling is that I've noticed that people are, they trust what they see through technology more than what they observe with their own eyes and ears. And as a side note, like me personally, like I'm kind of freaked out that other people aren't freaked out. I'm kind of freaked out that there's so many fucking people that are just like, yeah, so. And I'm like, oh my god, oh, we're fucked. We're so fucked. So here's really the bottom line and how it pertains to your individual mental health. By the way, as I'm going over this topic, if you're young, maybe just ask yourself, do you feel defensive? Do you feel protective? Do you feel like you need to protect the virtual reality of which you are accustomed to, just like it says in the Matrix? Because here's what I've learned. So I see these young people and they're so plugged in. They're so plugged in. And so when I challenge their version of reality, because it's clearly a huge source of their distress, I become the villain. Like, I mean, again, this is why the clip of the Matrix really haunts me, because it's like they see me as the enemy because I am threatening this thing that they have become so dependent on. And what they don't necessarily realize is that the source of their distress is this false virtual reality, digital reality that does not exist. It is a complete illusion. The stories and narratives about life and people are completely skewed and one sided, totally warped, totally inaccurate. They see life and the world and other people as one way, and it's not that way. And when they experience something that doesn't jive with this paradigm structure in their head that's been curated in the virtual world, it's very distressing. It's extremely distressing for them. So here's the very, very difficult question of the day, okay? I truly believe every single one of us needs to look closely at this. We need to look at ourselves, and we need to look a lot more closely at this and ask ourselves honestly. Here's a question, okay? How connected to reality am I? Because there's how you think the world ought to be, should be, versus how it really is. Okay, the gap between those is called a cognitive dissonance. The greater your dissonance, the greater your distress is going to be. Reality is going to be extremely distressing because it is completely incongruent with the virtual reality, with the fake one. I wanted to mention this as well. I find that those people are very, very unhappy, not only because they have an extremely negatively skewed perspective on life and the world, but their life actually lacks substance. You cannot have substance to yourself or to your life if you just live through a screen. If you experience life and relationships and the world and everything else through a screen, your life is going to feel extremely empty. It's going to feel like it's just going to feel totally hollow. And that's because living your life and becoming a person of substance is what gives you a sense of connection and meaning and purpose. That's what makes life worth living. If you live primarily through technology and social media, that's going to be stolen from you. That's going to be taken from you. You're just going to feel totally hollow and empty, like there's no substance to your life. And so what I found with a lot of these young people is that, like, if I manage to show them or convince them that social media, specifically technology and their life on social media, is destroying their life and completely skewing their perspective on what it means to be a person and to live, if I'm able to successfully do that, that's not even half the battle. Getting them to wander outside of the prison, getting them to leave the cage that they've been living in and go out and actually live, like, holy fucking shit. That's the hard part. Like, as hard as it is to show them, like, hey, social media is harming you. Hey, the virtual world isn't real. It seems real. It's not real. You need to go out and experience it. Like, that's extremely hard. They are so protective of this virtual world. They're very, very rigid about it, which is just one of those factors that coincides with psychosis, is that they're extremely rigid about it. They don't even consider a lot of the times, like, maybe this is a mental illness that I'm experiencing. They're very, very protective of that paradigm structure. For some of these youngsters, honest to God, like, getting them to just, like, venture out, like, breaking out of their tight little tiny comfort zone, it can be extremely challenging. For some of them, even like the smallest, most harmless little task feels like climbing Mount Everest to them. I mean, it's almost insurmountable. And I try to talk to other adults about this, and they're like, oh, well, what are you going to do? Well, I don't know. Just give them more phone time, I guess. Like, oh, good God, sometimes. Good God, talking to other people sometimes. So I realize that it's not realistic to ask people to just like completely disconnect, detach. I think it's more realistic to help them question everything. You got to question everything. Don't just accept everything that you hear. And in fact, you should do the opposite. You should be skeptical about everything that you hear. Even more so, you should be extremely skeptical about what might be considered a mainstream narrative, like about friendships, about vulnerability, and about relationships. Assume that what you've heard first is false. At least challenge it. At least challenge the narratives and the stories and the paradigm structures that you hear about life and everything. Like, for example, young people are going to hear that no matter what they do, they're never going to get ahead in life. Fucking challenge that. Like is that really true? Challenge it. Learn to challenge it. But here's the hard part. Here's the hardest thing that you need to do in life. And maybe this is going to probably be a whole other episode, but like, instead of focusing on the behaviors of other people, focus on your own behaviors. Turn the spotlight onto yourself. Fix yourself first. The next thought I had about this topic, though, honestly, I'm just realizing, is also video games. I talk about technology, social media, screen time. We got to talk for a minute about video games. Now, girls are generally more attracted to social media, tend to spend a lot more time on social media, and boys obviously tend to spend a lot more time on video games. I know it's not black and white. I know that. Keep it to yourself. I don't find as much that video games warp a person's perceptions. More so, it just provides a total escape from reality. It allows people to avoid life, avoid the world, avoid reality in general. Guys, that's not a good thing. Someone ought to tell you that's not a good thing. The adults these days, they're way too comfortable with young people just completely avoiding reality, and they should not be. And so with all of that in mind, honestly, I realize that this episode is very abstract, and I'm kind of all over the place. I have all these ideas in my mind. I swear there is a method to my madness. It seriously is my goal for this episode, for every person who listens to it, to question whether or not they live in reality or whether they live like in a fantasy or an illusion. I realize that reality is harsh. I realize that it makes people extremely uncomfortable. But living in a false reality, it causes more distress on a long-term level, like in a long-term way. The total inability to accept reality as it is will cause a lot of issues in the long run. So, and as per usual with my podcast episodes, we are going to take a closer examination at ourselves. If you're new to my content, mental health is found in looking closely at yourself, examining yourself, working through your own emotions, working through your own issues rather than avoiding them. So today's episode is going to come with some shadow work journal prompts, probably as well as a homework assignment. If you'd like to improve your own mental health and want to do some homework, this is the place to be. So if you're new here, I like to do what's called shadow work journal prompts at the end of every episode that has to do with our topic. If you're not familiar with shadow work, it is basically a method founded by the great Carl Jung. Apparently controversial, Carl Jung, but the great Carl Jung, he's great in my mind. I think Carl was a genius. This is a method where we unpack the subconscious for the purpose of understanding ourselves better, breaking patterns, getting to the core of the issues, etc., etc., etc. If you're going to do my shadow work journal prompts, I would recommend doing them in writing. You're going to get way more out of it if you do it in writing. So it is recommended by me, not your therapist. I'm a therapist. I'm not your therapist. But it's recommended that you keep a separate journal just for shadow work. If you're going to do my shadow work journal prompts, be warned, they are not for wimps. We are taking a very close look at ourselves when we do these shadow work journal prompts, and they can make us very uncomfortable. But if you avoid discomfort, if you avoid looking at yourself, you will never find mental wellness. I stand firmly by that statement. And by God, there sure is a lot of that going around these days where people refuse to introspect, self-examine, look at themselves, etc. And again, I'm a therapist, but I'm not your therapist. So if you have a history of a lot of trauma, emotional instability, and the like, you may want to work with your own therapist with these journal prompts. Okay, let's dive in. I think I'm also going to offer a homework assignment as well. So some shadow work and just like a self-reflective, homework assignment if you're up for it. Okay, first the journal prompts. Number 1. Okay, do you have a long list of shoulds and supposed to be's on how you think other people ought to be, or how you think the world should operate? Number 2, how realistic is your perspective on life? Or in other words, how connected are you to reality? Number 3, how much has technology and social media shaped your worldview, your perspectives, your beliefs, and your paradigm structures? If you're wondering what the difference is, like think of a belief as a tree and a paradigm structure as the forest. So it's like beliefs are kind of zooming into individual beliefs, and a paradigm structure is zooming out to see the whole bigger picture. Number 4, do you put more trust into what you see on a screen, or what you experience with your own 5 senses? Number 5, I think we're on 5, right? We're number 5. How empty or hollow does your life feel? How pointless or empty or hollow does your life feel? The reason why I'm asking that specific question is because if it feels extremely hollow or empty, well, that can be a strong indicator that you are not as connected to reality as maybe you ought to be. Number 6, what parts of reality do I have a hard time accepting? That one's going to require a lot of personal honesty. If you can do really well on that one, I am going to be very proud of you. I don't have to know you to be proud of you, I promise. And that one is a hard one because it requires a high level of personal honesty. Okay, let's go to the homework assignment. On a piece of paper, could be in a journal. Create some columns. Okay, you're going to create an individual column, and at the top, you're going to make a column 1 for work, 1 for friendship, 1 for relationship, 1 for self-esteem, 1 for just general attitude. Okay, we just have these 5 separate columns. Under each column, you're going to list the things, or the way you're going to list how social media has impacted those individual areas of your life. That 5th column, by the way, is intended to be like mental health. Like, how has it impacted your mental health, your mental well-being? Let's sit down, spend some time on that. Spend 10, maybe 20 minutes tops on it, mapping out how technology, social media, and this virtual reality has impacted all of those areas of your life. As a little bit of a warning, if you happen to do this homework, all of the homework in the shadow work journal prompts, and it happens to rip you out of the matrix, the proverbial matrix, don't freak out, don't panic, allow yourself to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Try not to overthink it. Talk to someone that you trust. But just take it slow. It's okay to be not okay. It's okay to be uncomfortable. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It can be highly distressing for people to realize that, hey, I thought I had a good grasp on reality when maybe I don't. That can be distressing. But our society, our culture is way too hell bent on avoiding any emotional discomfort. It's actually very bad for you to avoid anything that's uncomfortable. But definitely take it a little bit slow. Okay, so hopefully all of that made sense. I just sort of blah. It's a very abstract topic. It's a very challenging topic, very important one, because I see so many people where a lot of their distress is they are not truly connected to reality. Okay, so I hope that helps. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to follow. And help me grow my podcast. Tell a friend. And thanks again for listening. Thanks again for being here. Remember, you must do hard things. See ya.